So we got the right crankshaft.
Didn't we do bearings last time?
Yeah, we did bearings last time, so we're actually doing bearings properly. So we got our lowers, our rears, which are our thrusts, and our uppers. So we're gonna go ahead and we're gonna set the bearings in. We've made sure that all these surfaces are oil free. We're gonna set all these bearings in. We're gonna put the caps on. We're gonna torque the caps to spec. And then I'm gonna go into the dial bore gauge. We're gonna take a measure of the crankshaft, and then we're gonna measure the inner of the bearings, and that's how we're gonna determine our oil clearance. So,
why are we not using plastic
gauge?
Plastic gauge.
Because we're not rebuilding this on a dirt floor in Pakistan.
Okay. You guys gonna work all day and all you're gonna do is bearings?
No, we're actually gonna get the crankshaft in it this time.
Because I heard the intro and it said you were gonna do bearings.
We are gonna do bearings.
We're gonna get this thing together hopefully today.
Cool.
Zoom zoom.
This is all about bearings.
By the way, don't forget the room and seal.
Oh, thank you, Dad. I needed that piece of insight and fatherly advice.
Oh, yeah.
Give her a good time. We're just talking about this tie, if you want to get a shot of this.
How these bearings work.
Basically the oil's dropping through there.
So the oil comes through from the oil pump, it feeds to the oil filter, it goes up, it's going to feed through the camshaft first, through these bearings, and these are grooved all the way around, and then the oil is going to come down to the crankshaft, and then it's going to pressurize the crankshaft, and whatever excess oil will shed out each side of the bearing, and that's actually exactly how your thrusts are oiled and everything. It's just oiled, it's sprayed oil.
And then with that pressure, basically, you're saying
you're making a hydraulic. We are making a hydraulic wedge. So really, your crankshaft is never supposed to touch your bearings at all.
Right.
Like your crank is supposed to be riding on a film of oil. So really, whenever you see scratched bearings, it's because your crankshaft touched your bearing.
Right.
Which your crank is never supposed to touch your bearing at all. Technically, bearings should never wear in a perfect world.
Right.
Because it's completely riding on a hydraulic wedge, and the oil should keep the crankshaft suspended, so to speak.
Your questions?
Yes.
Why don't these little bumpers line up?
Because they're not supposed to line up. They're supposed to be opposite to each other. But actually, those notches don't really matter. Even a lot of bearings, like in race motors and stuff, they don't even put the little notches. The notches are just to make sure you put the bearing in the right place. Now, it really wouldn't matter if the tabs line up or not. It doesn't really matter. It's just to make sure people put the bearings in the right spots. And then what I'm doing is I'm just snugging these bolts down enough to get the cap seated.
Yep.
How that can be a thing. And then I'm going to go around. I've set my torque wrench up already. To torque these to 75 pounds like they want to be.
75 pounds?
Yeah.
So these aren't stretch bolts or anything?
Not at all. These are straight torque.
Just straight torque.
Yeah.
Wow.
Which you can do these by. There is a stretch method to do these, but we never stretch these. It's not like a bolt on a, like a head bolt on an LS or something where you're gonna, torque it, angle torque it to stretch, and then it's a throwaway bolt.
Yeah.
These you can do a stretch method on them with a gauge, but they're reusable fastener. They're not stretched to the point where they're no good anymore. Like you could over torque these and actually use them as a stretch bolt, I'm sure, but I think probably your bolt's gonna be stronger than your block it's attached to, sort of thing, where like a head bolt on an LS or something, it's a pretty big sized bolt that they're stretching, and they stretch fairly easily. It's not the material of these ARPs is a lot better than a stock stretch bolt.
It's mainly because these are aftermarket that are designed.
Aftermarket fastener, but even these are stock fastener. Nobody did angle torque in the 60s, 70s, 80s.
Oh, okay.
It was all just straight torque reusable fasteners. So now we're going to go ahead and we're going to measure the crankshaft. We're going to take a reference on the bore gauge. We're going to measure all these. Boop, boop, boop. This one, the rear main, is supposed to be 1 thou larger than the others. So we're going to shoot for between usually 1.5 and 3 thousandths on these. Anywhere in that range is pretty acceptable. and then between 2.5 and say 4.5 on the rear end.
Okay.
So even 2.
Oh, difference between this and the crank, you mean?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
So the crankshaft, we're gonna want it riding on, you know, a film of half of whatever our clearance is. So if we have 3 thou clearance, our crank's gonna be riding on a 1.5 thou film. Anywhere in that's fine. And then rods are gonna be a little bit smaller on clearance. I usually like to have those between 1.5 and 3. Even 1 thou on rods is fine. And we have 2 different size bearings. Usually aftermarket crankshaft, they're ground a little bit small on the rods, so it's not uncommon that we have to use a 1 thou under bearing to get our clearance where we want.
Oh, you put it underneath, okay.
Because usually what we'll have if we put a standard bearing is we're going to measure our rods and it's going to have like 4 thou all of a sudden. And we're going to go, oh shit, so we need a 1 under bearing. Put a 1 under bearing in it, we're going to have our 3,000s.
Okay.
So that's what we're going to do.
Why are these mains not in line with the piston? Like, I don't understand.
Well, you have to have room to clear your crankshaft.
I know, but they could just lined them all up.
Well, it's because you have to have. I mean,
it's just OCD. It's just crazy.
it's just your journal needs to actually be able to line up in the center of your rod. If you didn't have that, you'd have to have. Piston.
Oh, you know what?
You'd have to have.
I didn't realize the pistons are all off.
You'd have to have like piston pins that like the rod was on the edge of the piston and then the pin went all the way through it, which would not be very efficient.
So I didn't realize that the cylinders were actually offset too.
Yeah. So now we've set up our dial bore gauge. So
Well, we did with this on the crank.
We took our measure of our crankshaft with the. Oh, I'm not even.
Whatever it's called.
Hang on, guys. Hang on. Cut!
The measuring thing.
The measuring thing. The measuring stick. Have we tried thingamajigger? So anyways, I can't English right now. But we took a measurement of the crankshaft. So now that we have our measure of our crankshaft, we set our dial bore gauge up so it's exactly the same.
Viewers, if you know what this is, please leave it in the comments and send a link to Ty at ty@everythinghorsepower.com.
Ty is an idiot and can't speak English right now.com. So see, that's measuring a bit large. We're measuring right on 4,000ths there.
Yeah.
3.5 on that one. See, so really we shouldn't be seeing measures that large. I'm not sure what's going on there. Maybe a slight anomaly. Not sure what's going
Just on the first one?
Yeah, we'll have to I'm gonna have to take that off to be able to get to the others to measure them. That's one thing we're having other bearings in stock, some 1-unders and stuff like that can be quite the benefit. Now we also didn't torque the bolts with oil on them the way we were supposed to, so I mean that will tighten the clearances still. Same. Bit bigger. I want to recheck the zero on this once we get done too to make sure we don't have just a slight offset.
Okay.
They're all measuring the same, which is a good thing. That would say good things to go. I just want to make sure that our numbers are actually accurate just correctly.
Do we want to do oil the bolts too? Trying to.
This one should have 1 thou more. About the same, honestly. That's fine. That should be fine. Okay, I want to recheck the zero on this. So Todd, I'm gonna have you just hold that down on that. That's what I'm doing. And I'm gonna recheck my zero on this. Okay, so our 0 point has somehow shifted. So that would make sense that we had a false reading. Perfect. So now let's redo this. This is where about all of our clearances were. So let's recheck that. Right there, I'm seeing right on 3 thou oil clearance. Our other one that seemed a little far off was this front one. Let's recheck the front one. The others seemed fairly. So we had about a thousandth, 1.5 of difference there. Which actually is a big deal and is a good thing we went over that and verified that.
Mm-hmm.
Perfect. $2,500 is well clear. So it's perfect. So we're gonna have, this one was big, this one was big, so we're gonna have 2.5, 2.5, 2, 2, 3. Perfect. Wonderful. Excellent. So that part is good. That part we could go ahead and we can put the crankshaft in now. We just need to put the rear main seal in place. The crank can go in. And once the crank's in, we're going to measure the connecting rods. We're going to torque the rod outside of the engine. We're going to do the same thing with that, where we measure the housing bore and we measure the actual pin of the crank.
Okay.
Perfect.
Rear main seal first.
Rear main seal.
Okay, well, there's a little scoopy thing there.
Okay, so which way does the rear main seal go in, Todd? What does your knowledge about seals tell you about this?
There's no way for me to know just coming in blind, but I would say that one.
That would be incorrect.
So, shit.
Let's talk about rear main seals. So this part here, this is your half moon. This part here is your actual oil seal part. This is the part that seals oil right here. This guy here, this lip here is called a vacuum seal. So your actual oil seal part, this side is going to go towards the inside of your engine. So any pressure built up is going to lift and raise this edge, and that's going to make your actual oil seal of the crankshaft. This seal here is if you're running a vacuum pipe pump or some sort of thing like that, it's going to try and suck air into the engine by any seal where it can get air. So this is basically just a little seal, just if you're
it's still in the front.
to seal so there's no air getting sucked into the engine if you're running a vacuum pump or something. So basically this is really simple. This large lip goes to the inside. So that's going to go in place just like that, right like that. And then this guy's going to go in the upper cap, same idea, just like this. And a lot of people, you're supposed to like offset your lips like that. I hate doing that. I don't like doing that. What I'll do is I'll just grab a little bit of RTV on the end of my finger and I'll just put a dab of RTV. And that we're just going to glue this seal together and make it basically a one-part seal.
Okay.
So that's the go-to move there. So we can put this seal in here. Of course, make sure the ends of those seals are oil-free or else you're going to have quite the trouble. We're going to dab our silicone here. And then we're going to grab some assembly lube. We're going to...
Oh, when we bolt this down, that's it.
Yeah. That part of the project is A-OK. Todd has completely cleaned our crankshaft. And we're just going to drop this in. Do-do-do-do-do. Wonderful. She's sitting there happy. So now I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to oil my rear bearing and seal and put that on. It's important we put a little bit of oil on our seal when we're putting this together. If we don't put oil on our seal, we're going to have a lot of sealing problems because we can burn that seal up on first start if the seal doesn't have a little bit of lube on it. Always a good thing to just lube the seal a bit. Try and avoid the ends, obviously, because we're trying to seal it with the silicone for the other seal. You see I just dabbed silicone on the end of the other seal. Not too much, because if you put too much, it's going to cause, you'll jack the back of the cap up and you'll have a bearing clearance issue. So that's like a very, within moderation sort of a deal. So what I'm going to do is we're going to go ahead, we're going to pre-oil all these caps. We're going to set all these caps on, and we'll start to center and work our way out on just tightening down the caps, and then we'll go through and torque them all. And should be, then it has to pass the field test. That's the only thing you can't really measure without a really expensive measuring equipment is we can't measure to see that all these are perfectly in line with one another. So I mean, just because our clearances are right does not mean that the line bore is always correct, which the last time I put this engine together, the line bore was fine, so I have no reason to believe it's not still fine. It's not like the crank bearings were scrapped either, so. But there are some engines that are just much more prone to that problem, such as like a small block Ford or whatever, 302, stuff like that. The blocks are really light made, they're really weak. You'll see very often we'll put the crankshaft in. That's the first thing we do before we even actually try and assemble them properly. Fresh bearings, put a crank in them, try and turn them over. 9 times out of 10, you're gonna find out that when you go to start turning it, you're gonna have to push pretty hard, and then it'll break away and it's gonna turn really easily. That's telling you that there's somewhere in that bearing set, there's an edge that's touching or something like that. So that's when you take your main caps off, you take the crank out, you bring it, and you get it realigned home. So they're gonna refit all these caps like somebody's already done on this block. They're gonna grind a little bit of material off the caps, they're gonna pass home through. They're gonna make sure it's all well in line and everything's working fine. And at that point you can bring it back home, reassemble it, and that's your key to success. Just, it's always something, it's not a common small block Chevy problem, it's not a common big block Chevy problem. Small block Ford happens a lot. I would assume a lot of, like, even maybe aluminum block engines, stuff like that, I would assume you're gonna see that a lot more.
Well, when we've signed on the bearings, when we took it apart too? Yeah.
Usually you do. Usually you'll see an engine like that, it'll have a pretty coppered out bearing, where it's just worn through that, top layer on the bearing. So usually there are some warning signs, but I've seen some that, the bearings just all look worn, but you wouldn't think there was an issue. And you go to put new bearings in it, and all of a sudden, once that clearance is actually tightened up, you notice a problem. Now, evidently it was fine, like it probably would run like that again, but you're just ruining bearings. You're setting yourself up for failure, basically.
But I drive this pretty gingerly.
Oh yeah, you are very kind to your vehicle. No, whenever
you only had to rescue me one time.
Yeah, you only blew the drive shaft off of the bottom once. That's true. No, that's one of those things where, like, if you're rebuilding it in your backyard, it's one thing, but when I'm building an engine, it's another thing. It's a couple $100 to fit the line home. You always fit the line home. And honestly, I'm to the point where any small block Ford in the garage, I immediately bring it and have it line honed. Like I don't even start boring them or anything. I will crack check them. I'll make sure they're good, they're usable, and I take them immediately to the line honed because it's always an issue with that engine family. And you're always best, just get ahead of it, get it dealt with. It's the right thing to do. And that's what we're gonna do. So this small block Chevy, very rare. Usually, if somebody's had the caps off the block and then somebody put a cap off a different block on your block or something like that, then you're gonna have that issue. But no, 9 times out of 10, that's not a small block Chevy issue.
So last time we were at this, we put a piston to check the clearance, but we know it's good.
We're gonna do it again.
Yeah.
We're gonna do it again. We're gonna make sure we've got.
We assembled the dry last time compared to
We
this.
did, yeah. And this time, because it looked very passable, we're gonna put this together, and as we go, if we see one that's not working out, we're gonna find out the hard way.
And grind it up.
Yep. And we'll have to
That'll set us back.
and we'll have to take this all back apart. But the good part is now, like, the bearing clearance is set. The bearing clearance is fine.
Yeah.
If to take it back apart, it's pretty dummy proof just to set it back together.
Yeah.
Again, there's not really there's no figuring that has to be done. Okay, so perfect.
No more mats?
No more mats. So, this is the part where, like Todd says, we should grab one of the rods and pistons, maybe pop the rings off it again, and we're going to use that to rotate it around, make sure we're going to clearance our rod bolts, because the stroker crank, we could hit the block. So, what bearings we're going to need. Those bearings are really true to their size. They're a really good quality product. One thou under. See, it's supposed to be on the 0 and it's one notch down. So we're going to need 1 thou bearings. It's supposed to be a 2-100 journal, and it's measuring 2099. So we're going to go ahead, and it's right on 2099. So I know for sure we're going to use the 1 thou bearings. I'll just put the standards back in the package. We're going to grab 1 thou bearings. We'll set this all up with 1 thou bearings.
Okay.
And I'm very confident, given that the new rods, the housing boards are right on and everything, we should have absolutely 0 oil clearance issues with this. We should be.
I don't understand why we're swapping these out.
You want like all your oil pressure to dissipate right off those rod journals? That's good. That's what we want. So we went ahead and we got some HP, or we got some 001s. Oh, these are actually race car ones. I have some other ones on the shelf anyway. So 001s, so that's a 1 thou under bearing. That's a standard bearing. So, for our other 001s, we might have to use those too, which is, I guess, could be fine. It's just a very expensive bearing.
Oh, the race ones?
Those are the race ones, and they're coated. So if we use, if we can use these, it's just, they're not the cheapies, that's for sure. So these are the Dr. Spendadolls.
Dr. Spendadolls?
Yeah. So these you're gonna see the bearings black. That's a coating, it's a Teflon coating they put on these bearings. And that's like your top of the line race bearing. So, we'll clean these suckers up. These ones have been used for clearance checking before. We'll clear these suckers up, and we're gonna just set those in there. We'll put a little bit of assembly lube on. We'll just check it in each cylinder, rotate the engine over, make sure the rod's gonna clear the block everywhere. Once that's done, we can actually we can check our clearance properly and start putting the rods in their respective holes. And hopefully, if we get all that done, we can start looking at putting the cam in and getting the cam timing part done and stuff like that.
Do you want me to start cleaning all the bearings?
All the rest of the bearings are clean. They're fresh in the package.
Oh,
so these two have been taken out to do a clearance check before.
Okay.
So they've got some assembly oil on them.
So now with these race bearings, how high can I bear it now?
All the more RPMs.
All the more RPMs?
Mm-hmm. Well, really, it's like, you're going to feel like Mario Andretti now, probably. Is he dead? Maybe.
Please leave it out in the comments.
Yeah, is Mario Andretti still alive? Because I feel like...
No, he's trying to do an F1 team now. Or it could be his son or something.
I think it was his son.
Him and Cadillac, right?
Yes, it's true. Seems like I've seen something about this. Look at that.
I really love all of our videos. I'm like the stand around guy. I just stand, kind of lean on the side.
Yep, that's a motor right there. That's okay. Everybody needs their...
Well, we talked about this before. Like, I can imagine you doing this. Like, you just want to be alone and you just want to slowly pick at it and go. You know what I mean?
Then you have the guy
You have 4 people in the room.
Ain't got no gas in it. I know what's wrong with it. Ain't got no gas in it.
What are we doing over those carburetor bearings again?
Did you change your muffler bearing recently? Or?
Oh, it's a muffler belt.
Oh, muffler belt? Sorry, I'm not current. I don't speak fluent in that language. So I'll do the right thing and just put a little bit of lube on these piston skirts so we're not scratching up our pistons, putting them in dry. I was waiting for a spicy comment.
Right, exactly.
This is nothing.
This is a PG channel.
Disappointed me. Well, we checked them out for kids' box. I mean,
oh, really? Okay.
Not many kids want to hear about 350 Chevys. Or 383 Chevys in this instance.
You want me to hold it in there? Or?
I can do it. That's kind of. Whoop. So that, sure, can you hold that up, Tom? I'll take you up on that offer. Because I didn't order this bearing yet. I don't really care about doing the oil clearance properly on this yet. I'm just going to go ahead and just lightly tighten that, just torque it down a bit with the impact, but not enough to be. We're not going wild here. We're just snugging it down a little bit. Clearance. Okay. So now we should be able to, if you want to come over here and watch what we're talking about. Oh, we're close. So right here is where the rods usually hit. You can see there's a little notch stock in the block right there. So that's where your rod bolts are going to get really close to. And we're clearing. We're good there. So that one passes the check. Now it's also very important that you actually notice which way the rod is and make sure your rod's not in backwards. We might have to flip our piston over to do this properly for all of them, because they do offset these rod bolts a little bit in the connecting rod on the stripper clearance ones.
Oh, okay.
So it's just necessary that we check that out, because we might get a false reading and think we're not okay when really we're completely fine.
Did you want to talk bolts too? You're gonna talk about these and stretch bolts.
So now say we're gonna go to this side. So your one thing you want to always check on your rods is your chamfered side here. Your one with your big cutout is gonna always go towards the edge of the journal. So if you're on this side, your large chamfer is gonna go towards this side. If you're on this side, your large chamfer is gonna go towards this side. So we had to put the pistons on the rods accordingly. So if we're going in this hole over here, this chamfer is going to go towards this side, so the piston's going to go in this way, which is actually correct. Now what you don't want to do, like Todd, is get the crankshaft really dirty, because that's a great way to destroy the bearings.
It's an educational video.
It's fixing the piece.
Let's talk about bolts.
Yes, so these bolts, there's a way you can torque these bolts. They sell a little gauge. Actually, I have one over there in the toolbox somewhere. There's a little pin guide here, and there is a target. If we look in the package with the rods, you're gonna see there is a little target stretch thing. You can torque them either by straight torque or by a target stretch. A lot of race engine builders like to do them by the target stretch because it's a little bit more of a pure torque. So, we're gonna do the same thing. Oodles of clearance. We have probably 1/16 of an inch between, even more maybe, even 1/8 of an inch between that connecting rod. So we're good. So I guess we'll do all this bank. We'll just walk down this bank. We'll do this whole bank and then that whole bank. And if everything checks out good, we'll re-clean everything. And then we'll go ahead and put the rings back on and we'll actually put things together properly. Yeah. So I like to actually use engine oil here, not assembly lube, because assembly lube's a little bit too thick, and you don't really want too much oil on your piston rings because it can actually cause like an oil foul in the cylinder, and then your rings will never really seat properly. It'll glaze the cylinder over. So this just, whatever engine oil you're going to use in the engine, if you're going to use 2050 or whatever, doesn't really matter. Just wipe generally a little bit of oil on here. Your assembly lube really goes on the bearing more than anything else.
You didn't want to put his cap back on.
I would like to put that cap back on. Just figure it out. So I'm going to go grab engine oil so we can do that part.
Start cleaning the next one.
We'll rotate this. Also, could you actually start by cleaning the cylinders a little bit too?
Okay.
Grab some more like brake cleaner on a rag and just go through and wipe all of our cylinders out while we're here.
Yeah.
I know we've already cleaned it, but it's best to clean it way more than we need to. You'll still see you're going to get quite a bit of dirt. This is our cylinder number 1. We are furthest forward cylinder, so it's going to be this guy. rotate the crankshaft down to where it's accepting. Yes. Double check all our ring placements are on point. This one, for some reason or another, this oil ring needs rotated. Rotate the oil ring, no big deal. Wonderful. The others are perfect. So what I always do is I'm going to put my assembly lube on my bearing. Make sure your hands are nice and clean. You're going to wipe it across the surface of the bearing. If you don't wipe it across the surface of the bearing, it's pretty easy for it to, the bearing feels a little bit edgy. Feels like there's something on the edge of that bearing. Came right off of my finger, so we're good. So what I always do is I wipe it across the surface of the bearing because it's just make sure you have coverage before you put it in the engine. And then this is just some 2050 engine oil. So I'm just going to wet the skirts, and I always just tap it to just get a bit on the rings. Necessary, you have something to keep the cylinder lubricated while installing and stuff like that. You'll get some of this right back out of the top of the cylinder. It'll just make sure that the piston's, not sitting there dry in the cylinder, of course. So I'm going to take that, and then Mr. Todd's going to use the compressor. I'm going to offset the gap in the compressor so it's nowhere near a ring, like a gap in a ring. And then ideally I would rotate this engine up so this is all the way at the top. Makes it a bit easier to work with. Perfect. Now I'm going to set this down in here. Boom. Wipe my fingers up a little bit because there's no way I can hold the hammer. And butter. Now that that's in there, we're going to go down here. We're going to make sure that we're going to get on it properly and we're not going to scar the crankshaft up. Perfect. So if you have one of these with studs instead of bolts, a lot of times what guys will do is grab some like rubber fuel line and just slip some gas line over it, and then that way you can't fumble your stud and ram it into the crankshaft, because if you tap the crank with a stud, it'll just put enough of a mark in it. It's going to go really badly.
Can you get two and clean it up?
Sure, go ahead, and then I'm going to put this cap on. I'm just going to tighten all these caps with the impact for now, just lightly, and then afterwards we're going to go around and just work all of them. All of our caps, so probably with 4 wrench. It's not rocket science. You can make it a lot more complicated than this, and there are applications where that matters. People working on airplanes, people working on pro stock engines, stuff like that. It really matters. But it's not. Now, the one thing I always like to make sure of when I get one in is just that I can move the rod freely back and forth. It's a good indicator if you have a bearing issue or something's wrong on the wrist pin or something like that. So that moves back and forth nicely. I assume it's going to turn like butter, which it does. Wonderful. Actually, at this point, I'm going to go ahead. Wall starter, rooms on it. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to put the keys in the crankshaft here, the Woodruff keys, and then we can actually use our crank socket with a ratchet on it to turn the engine on.
There we go.
Yes. Somehow we've got an issue.
You want me to do?
I don't know, I'm just struggling. Give me a second here. I don't know why I'm struggling, but I'm struggling. I'm wondering if I need to rotate the engine a little bit. I'll flip this thing upside down and see what it's doing. I think I might need to rotate the engine a little bit to clearance a connected. That's one thing the stroker can do.
Oh yeah? Oh, the weights and stuff are kind of get too high?
You know, everything kind of moves a little bit more.
Oh, okay.
If we get into an issue where you're... This one looks okay on those. We had this all in here the other day, so...
Yeah.
Yeah, see, our rods are down there. To me, we're gonna need to turn the crank. Interesting.
Wow, okay.
Wow. Yep. For sure. We're actually gonna pull the cam out of it, aren't we? Okay.
Yeah, because it has to go in one shot. Like, you can't move it after, right? You could ding it up.
Yeah, well, once it's...
Did we read the cam specs on the video yet?
Ooh, I don't know, that's a good question. Okay. So there we go. Excellent. Wonderful. Terrific.
So what just happened there?
So we had to turn the crankshaft because it's important on some of these things. You get into, with the stroker crank, since the rods move up and down more, you can actually get into an area where you have camshaft or crankshaft clearance problems, where if you have a lobe on the cam pointing down and the crank's all the way up, you could get an instance where you, to quote Mike Tyson, they kiff.
Oh, okay.
Which we don't want, right? So, and now, I'm gonna rotate this so the timing mark is down. Okay. And we can flip this thing back up where you can see good now.
Where's the timing mark?
Right here on the outside. You can see, I'll show you how it's done. This one's a little bit hard to see because the gear's not nitrated black.
That sounds more like the down, I know.
So, right here there's a 0 stamped in it.
Oh, okay.
So, now we're not actually degreeing the cam like properly. See, it's a 0 there, we put it on that dowel, and then the 0 there. We're just doing this the old school close enough way.
Oh, usually the pin is right where the 0 is?
No, this is how this normally is. Just it's got so many positions because we can retard or advance the crank.
Right.
So anyways, this is just normally you're supposed to set it like on a race motor you set up a degree wheel and you know it's like
Right.
you can make a performance out of this. That's not what we're doing here.
And what was the explanation between why not use gears versus chain?
Chain just stays a little tighter. Usually gears work fine. They just tend to be a little bit noisy. When they get wear in them, they lash and they're almost more slack than a chain. Like when they get used.
Yeah.
I mean, you can have an instance where like you put gears on it because you thought that was better and then, you know, all of a sudden your gear's actually looser than if you would have just
Put a
put
chain.
a chain on it. I
And there's no tension on this, like that's it, right?
Yeah, no, that's it exactly. So that's,
And you didn't have to like line up the...
yeah, I had to line up the dowel pin.
Oh, okay.
Oh, I just did the wrong thing. I just pushed it through the hole.
You want to push back?
Yeah, hang on. I'm gonna grab a bolt.
180.
Okay.
Yes.
180, yes, and it'll run perfectly. Because 180 is 0.
Okay.
It'll just put it on the compression there. It'll put it on the exhaust stroke instead of on the intake stroke. That's all.
Okay. And it's the same.
It's identical.
Okay. You need that.
What I actually need is a screwdriver, pointy screwdriver.
Different than that?
Different. In that toolbox, Todd. not like that. Yeah, that big one down. That no, up the top part. The biggest drawer on the top part.
Rob, whatever you want.
Just some pointy. That's pointy. That'll work. It's a bit big, maybe. Yeah, not that big.
Good?
Maybe. This should not be this hard. This is actually embarrassing.
It's aligning the dowels the problem.
Yeah, because the cam spins in the bearing so freely that it keeps trying to spin away from me or go back, because this also serves as the retainer plate for going backwards.
Oh yeah.
So it's kind of a bit problematic. So this, actually that timing set really is not very tight. I'm not a huge fan of that timing set. Maybe once I get the bolts tight, let me tighten it up a bit. Let's just test fit it with some bolts all the right length. And then there's a button that we have to put here, a thrust button. Because
Yeah, like how's it gonna keep it here and not against the block?
well, it goes against the block because it has a roll bearing on it.
Oh, okay.
But then you have to have another thrust button to keep it off the cover.
Okay.
We're just fitting this cam button. It's important. These are fit to every different front cover you would use. So really, the proper way to do this is you grab the straight edge. You're going to use this as your highest point. You'd like to measure from this surface to this flange, and then we would do respectively the same thing with this cover. Lay a straight edge over it and measure to this center spot. So that's going to be used as a thrust bearing, basically. What I did is I just noticed it was around 1/8 or a bit like that too long, so I just eyeballed it for right now. You have to keep in mind this is going to be plus the gasket diameter. So as you can see, we're pretty close now. I'd say now we're close enough. If we actually want to measure this properly, we could go ahead. But I would say that we could fairly safely remove, what's your gap right now, Todd, about 1/16?
Yeah, so the same as the top.
I think we could pretty safely remove about 1/16 before getting really close on it. But this is one of those things. If the cam moves 20 thou front to back, it's fine.
It don't matter.
It does not matter.
Yeah.
It's just you don't want the cam walking 1/8 of an inch or something like that. You know, then you're going to get into stressing your timing chain. You could break a timing chain, all kinds of things. So basically, I'm just going to take this little. It's just a little UHMW bushing. I'm going to walk right over to the lathe, and I'm just going to turn just a little bit off the tip, and kind of, they have a little shape to them, so you just kind of have to custom follow the shape to give them a little bit of a peak. So we have a little bit of a roadblock here in measuring it with tape. We measured the depth of the oil pump pickup at 7.5 inches, and the depth of the oil pan at 7.25. And if you come and look at the rear rail, you'll see that we're definitely, this pan is sitting directly right on that stupid
The
pickup.
fact that the pan is cowbell kind of tells you.
Yeah, this pan definitely has a little bit of a boom. So maybe a bit of forming there.
I think just cut your little retainer down here and we'll just drop it. Maybe you can get probably enough.
Even just take the bolt out.
Oh yeah.
We can probably shape it. Anyways, regardless,
It sort of runs uphill.
we're gonna need to modify on this a little.
If we just drop that and re-weld it,
Yeah.
I think we can get it.
Yeah, we're trying to run into a little bit of clearance on
Big
that.
drill trucker.
Sure. So we're over here, we're just changing over our valve springs from our stock ones that came on these AFR heads to our newbies.
You want to show the difference between the two?
We'll do that right now. So the stock ones, how they're pretty long and they're a double spring, they're also pretty weak at lift. So this is a much sturdier and shorter spring, so you can see them side by side. Quite a bit shorter, but when we actually put them at the correct installed height, they measure almost identical in pressure. except this spring's going to ramp up quite a bit faster, and this spring's going to have a lot more open pressure than this spring will. So hopefully that should gain us some valve control at RPM that we simply didn't have before. So before we go to the dyno and bend valves or whatever, we're just going to do the right thing and
Upgrade all of them.
this right now. So I don't think these springs weren't terribly expensive, and these are pack springs, so they're of a very good quality. So it's a good upgrade.
Great. And then we've already we put the pan on, but we had some clearance issues, so Ty modified the pickup on the oil pump, and we've just we welded it on. And then we don't have gaskets for the oil pan, so we're
gonna order that and one of those engine dress-up bolt kits. So it comes with the water pump bolts. We need a water pump anyways.
Yeah.
Come with like water pump timing cover bolts, oil pan bolts. It'll come with all of those little fasteners and doohickeys, and it's all smaller headed stuff, so it'll all fit well.
yeah.
So we're gonna go ahead and order on that. Other than that, the intake's still at vapor blast too.
Yeah.
So we'll just put this together. We'll try and get all the valve train in it. We might leave it just with heads on it, and I'll adjust valve train and everything. You know, when we get the rest of our stuff,
Yeah.
we can finish the engine.
So we got the hydraulic lifters in there. Push rods are over there in a box. My brother's helping us by cleaning off all the silicone gaskets off the old valve covers that we had, and we'll stick those in the washer. And yeah, close it up.
Okay, so what we're up to now is we just got the heads on, heads are all torqued, bolts are sealed, and now we're working with what they call adjustable guide plates. So basically this, we can adjust where our push rod sits side to side in the cylinder head, so we can get the perfect geometry with our rocker arms. So what we're gonna do is we can just use one. We're gonna use just one normal push rod. We're gonna use one rocker, and we're just gonna go around and we're gonna adjust this and tighten stuff down as we go. So this, say we'll start here. We're gonna set all these down on here. And then as you can see, what that's gonna do is we can adjust to either sit this way, or obviously centered is what we're shooting for. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna adjust all those till that rocker tip is centered. I'm gonna take this up and I'm gonna tighten that stud. So that's what we're gonna do for all of these. We're gonna do that. So, and then afterwards, if we see anything that's a little bit off, we can just go right ahead and adjust that. I'll jump sideways. So I'm gonna do that. I'm gonna test it. Perfect. I'm just gonna do more or less the same thing everywhere.
Well, this is your main engine that most people can afford, and you know everybody builds. Most of your crate engine stuff, you know your better crate engine stuff. It's, well, a lot of them aren't built with that nice inner components there, but they're built basically to this horsepower level.
Yeah.
A lot of those companies they use the crappy parts. You know, you get them cheap. My nephew bought one on the
I don't care.
on eBay. What a pile of crap that was.
Wait, the Hooligans, didn't the Hooligans buy one off eBay? A Blueprint engine?
Blueprint's an actual company.
Yeah,
Blueprint makes a nice product.
We did like a big blower engine for their donk or whatever.
Yeah, they're not they
Built
don't
a donk.
They built a donk, yeah.
and they warranty that thing. You know, like they know you're gonna beat on it, raise it, they warranty it.
Oh wow.
Yeah, Blueprint's pretty legit.
Yeah, and I'll give them some credit. I'll crap on crate engines sometimes, but I'll give them some credit. They make it their own block.
Okay.
I mean, they're pretty cool.
The other thing I thought about from a crate engine was just buy it from Chevy Performance or whatever, right? Like that should be a good build, right?
Sure.
Well, that's what this was.
Okay.
Wow, and the cylinders are too tight. So, I mean, you know.
Yeah, that's exactly. It's,
I bought the one time a 502, that 502 cubic inch, 502 horse engine they were selling. Put it in that 56 Buick. And it, that damn thing was, I mean, just had plain Stampfield rocker arms on it and everything. I mean, it was an $8,500 engine way back then.
Yeah, and really it was like a stock big block Chevy.
You don't have a pan gasket on that.
No, I don't have anything on it.
You hear that crank in the windage tray there.
Yeah. Yeah, well, it's not tight either, I don't know.
We'll explain to the viewers what you're doing that time.
Yeah, right now I'm just going through and I am setting the lash on all these valves. So I'm giving them a half a turn of preload since they're hydraulic. And I'll tighten down the adjuster and just snug them a skosh more. So I'm 2.5 and 3/4 of a turn of preload, which tends to be about perfect.
You find your base by spinning your push rod until you get resistance. And even here without the intake, you get, sometimes you'll look in and even see your plunger, but your plunger's at the very top in your lifter right now. So what you want to do, you want to squeeze that plunger down into that hydraulic cushion 60 to 80 thousandths.
Basically, the actual spec on that, if you read up on that properly, is they take the total amount you can squish the lifter
Yeah, split it in half.
and split it in half, and that's how much you're supposed to be able to do there. So you could calculate that pretty easy with threads per inch on your nut, plus the total measure you're going for.
So what he does, like here he's going to set, so the exhaust valve is just starting to open. The intake valve is on the base circle now. So now he can get his push rod at 0, give her a half, and then a bit more. They usually, most guys want 3/4 of a turn, which is a belt there.
I thought that you had to do this with like feeler gauges. You have to put like a feeler gauge.
That's for solid.
That's for solid.
Solid,
okay.
yeah.
And you have a dummy cam.
Yeah.
Whoa.
This one's made for so idiots in factories can adjust valves and it doesn't hurt their brains.
And
It's quieter for
People
a
don't get
quiet.
lot of
Valves.
kilometers quiet valve train.
Yep.
you really never touch these. If you have to start adjusting these, something's going wrong probably.
Yeah, exactly.
The only time I've ever had to go back and readjust them is if you don't do it really with the cam on the base circle. If you just, a lot of guys will just kind of have both lifters down and set them.
Mm-hmm.
And every once in a while, usually that works too, but every once in a while you hear one tick. If you do it really finding the base circle the way he's doing it, you won't. So basically you'll do the intake valve, when the exhaust valve just starts to open. And then you'll do the exhaust valve, you'll completely cycle the intake valve to bottom, and when it's almost coming back up to close, then you do the exhaust valve. And that's when your cam is on its true base circle for each valve.
Now, obviously, the closer to stock your cam is, the more room you have to adjust in there. That's okay. It's just the more radical your cam gets, the less your window is for actually adjusting it properly.
But you gotta be a little more careful about valve interference with pistons and all kinds of stuff. The more radical you get.